Okay, here we go. Performance art in Vancouver has never been purely pursued as a visual arts discourse. Coming out of interdisciplinary practices in the 60s, where it was often tied to music, media, and dance practices, it is also historically close ties in Vancouver to writing and photography. This panel explores some of the history with people who had a strong hand in developing it, tracing its history through the 60s and 70s, heavily influenced by jazz, rock, and later punk. We follow the unique path performance art took in Vancouver. We look at the close alliance with photographic and literary practices that have marked its development. Intermedia was formed in 1967 and supported performance art practices into the 70s. Their annual takeover of the Vancouver Art Gallery was an important time in Canada for seeing cutting-edge interdisciplinary work that combined installation, media, and live practices. In the 1970s, Western Front was an important venue for importing important work from inside and outside Canada. The program over 30 years has brought in many important international performance artists. Video In was also producing work that combined live and media practices. In 1980, we get the coming together of the Video In and the Western Front pumps to produce the Living Art Festival that shows a large range of work being produced in the city at that time. The 80s saw performances split into new venues like the Unit Pit and the Grunt, but also places like Or Gallery and Kootenai School of Writing. Performance had developed many separate histories in Vancouver. In the early 90s, identity issues took a front seat with production of artists of color and Aboriginal artists and the transgender. Through events and exhibitions like Queer City in 1993, Racy Sexy in 1994, performance art played an important role in the development of these issues in the city. By decades and other practices took over. Performance art resurged nationally and festivals sprang up. In 1999, Bryce Kenyon and I started the Live Biennale of Performance Art with the first festival right at the end of the century. 10 artist centers, galleries, and arts organizations participated in the first festival. Subsequent biennials in 2001, 2003, and 2005 established performance through a high-profile festival with considerable press attention. But performance has also lurked at the edges of practices of the Vancouver School as well. Practices such as Jeff Wall, Ian Wallace, Rodney Graham, and Stan Douglas often employed elements of performance in their production. The former three were all musicians in New Jersey, a 1980s art rock band. Since 1999 and the advent of live, performance art has taken a higher profile within the city. In addition, its former territory has been encroached by interdisciplinary practices by other media. In many ways, within its success is the possibility of disappearance. The performed action takes on wider and more diverse meanings as it breaks out beyond the artist audience paradigm. YouTube, Step of the Second Life, give it a life that can and does eclipse the live performance. I've always described performance art as a history without a technique, but even that history is widely contested. Bryce Kenyon joked after Live at the end of the century that nobody seemed to be able to tell him what performance art was, but everyone had an opinion on what it wasn't. Moving through in the 50s and 60s, moving through live action, fluxus, intermedia, action art, the tide, we finally come to the phrase performance art in the 70s. But 10 years later, it's fragmented back out again into live art, durational work, relational work, dialogical practice, and even the sole word performance, which can seem to mean anything at all given its context. Later panels in the series would deal with the latter terms, but it's up to this panel to determine where and how these practices developed here and what they have left as a legacy to the city's art